Welcome to the Children's Author Show. If you ever dreamed of writing a book that inspires young minds, builds a lasting brand, and even creates a sustainable career, then you're in the right place. From crafting unforgettable stories, to marketing your books, to even monetizing your brand, we'll cover everything that you need to succeed as a children's author. So grab your notebook, fuel that creativity, and let's make your author dreams a reality. This is the Children's Author Show. Welcome to the very first episode of the Children's Author Show. My name is Andy Coates. I'm an award-winning children's author, an author coach, and your host of the Children's Author Show. If you're an aspiring or established children's author, whether you're self-publishing or dreaming of landing a traditional deal, then you are in the right place. This podcast is here to help you grow, to develop, to build that solid, sustainable, and professional brand as a children's author. And for the first episode, I thought it would be fun for me to introduce myself, share my publishing journey, and tell you why I created this podcast in the first place. So let's jump in. We'll start with my publishing journey. I've been published as a children's author for about 4 years. And in that time, I've had the honor of winning several awards, writing across multiple genres, from chapter books to picture books to even now middle grade novels. But my journey didn't start with that full-fledged plan. Like many authors, I started with a spark of inspiration and an idea, a hopeful dream, really, and a story that I just felt like I needed to tell the world, to tell a friend, to tell anybody who'd be willing to read that book. So my first book series that I created was called The Wild Adventures of Barnaby and Drew. And this was a fun, exciting chapter book series about two clever and adventurous kids, these young boys, who end up solving a lot of mysteries of these problems and circumstances they find themselves in. And really, it's based around myself. My name is Andy, or Andrew, so Drew, and then my best man in my wedding, and I was the best man in his wedding. His last name is Barnaby. And so we thought, we didn't grow up together. We thought it'd been a lot of trouble we would have found ourselves in if we would have grown up together as kids. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of tell a story around the two of those boys spending time together. So we mirror a lot of our childhood personalities around that, and the cleverness and wittiness of some of the humor that's in there is just a whole lot of fun. And this series, really, it was inspired for my love for adventure. My wife and I climb a lot of mountains, and we love to go on adventures, but I also love storytelling. And I wanted to create a book that really captured the spirit of curiosity, of problem solving, of humor even. Something that kids would enjoy, but also that parents would feel really good about. Something they would be okay their kids reading, no matter where their affiliation is on religion or politics, that it just was bigger than all that. That it was something every parent would be okay with their child reading. And one of those elements that I realize when you're writing for kids is that it's really important to balance the adventure of the story with strong, relatable characters. If a kid's going to stay engaged in the book, they need to be able to really connect to the character. And I wanted to incorporate a few other elements as well, not just strong characters, but also I wanted to incorporate a few elements into this story, or this series, really, because I knew I had multiple books in store. And this passion project of mine, I felt like it needed to have a little bit extra to it, because I grew up as a struggling reader. It wasn't until I got to high school that I took some speed reading courses that I really learned how to comprehend and be able to read and have confidence in my reading. But as a kid, I really struggled with reading. And I know there's still this day, there's a lot of kids who still struggle reading. So I wanted to create a book that would be very valuable to the struggling reader. And if you know much about book publishing, maybe you're new to this, maybe you've been in it for a little while, but I'm going to let you know, it can be very expensive to publish a book that has a lot of illustrations in them. Picture books are very expensive to produce. It's cheaper to produce a large middle grade novel. It's cheaper to do that than it is to do a 32-page picture book. And so I wanted to create this chapter book that had a lot of illustrations in it. And you're talking 3 times the size of a picture book. So this was going from not 32 pages, but 100 plus pages in each one of these books. So I knew the costs were going to be expensive to produce it. So I decided to self-publish this book, knowing that I was going to take some cuts to my royalty, and I was going to have thin margins, but I wanted to create this chapter book series that was full of colorful illustrations. Almost every other page has illustrations on them, because I wanted this book to be able to be action-packed, full of these fun characters and a lot of illustrations, and of course a bunch of humor mixed in, to be able to keep the struggling reader engaged. It's where I struggled as a kid, was staying engaged into the storyline. And when I share these books with those elementary students who are struggling, and I announce that it's full of illustrations, they go crazy. They love it. They love to have those illustrations and the story. So it's really helpful for the struggling readers. That was the first thing I wanted. The second element I wanted to incorporate is I have a passion for adventure. I love for people to get out there and explore the outdoors, to take on some challenges. So I wanted my story to have a built-in adventure inside the book. So in this series I created, there's 4 books to the series. The first book is Uncle Buck's Treasure. The second book is called Zombie Outbreak. The third book is The Tale of 4 Kings. And depending on when you're listening to this may or may not be released yet. But the fourth book in the series is called The Sands of Time. It releases in fall of 2025. So if you're listening after that, then the fourth book is already released as well. And in the first book, Uncle Buck's Treasure, my wife and I wanted to do something really special. So several years ago, on some adventures we were doing, we stumbled across this story of a man named Forrest Fenn who hid $2 million worth of treasure in the Rocky Mountains. And then he wrote a book. And in the book, he had a poem. And that poem, if you could solve the poem, you could find the treasure. And find the treasure, you got to keep the treasure. And people spent a decade searching for that treasure. Now it's been found. And there was a whole community built around searching for Forrest Fenn's treasure. And I thought, man, it'd be so fun to create, not near to that scale, but to create a treasure hunt for kids and families. So my wife and I did is we purchased about $5,000 worth of gold and silver and jewelry and these antiques that we created a treasure for the story. And we took that treasure, those items, and we connected them into the book. And then we just divided all those treasures pieces into 3 different containers. And we hid those 3 containers around the United States in 3 locations. And inside the book, there's a story to Uncle Buck's Treasure, and the same treasure hunt that they're on is the same treasure hunt that reflects the real treasure that's hidden out there. So it sends kids on a fun adventure to go find, and if they can solve the clues and they find the treasure belongs to them. And so kids love this. As I go into schools and visit with kids and talk about the treasure, they get fired up, and they always tell me they know where the treasure is. I know they don't, but they immediately, I know where it's at. And so that was a fun thing we did to start out, was in book 1. And because it got so much excitement and momentum, and we loved it so much, for Zombie Outbreak, we hid in 5 locations some awards. And with those awards, also some small prizes that come along with it. But it's a nice trophy award to the winner who finds that location. And in the book, there are some cryptic clues to solve and to figure out. And if you can figure out those clues, and hidden within the illustrations, there's a lot of clues. If you can solve those and then go on the adventure, you can find these prizes, and the prize belongs to you. And I have a fun special prize if you find it. So that's a fun thing too. So there's 5 of those hidden across the United States. And a lot of what I do, I'm based out of Louisiana in the United States. And a lot of the schools I go to are from the region that I'm in. And as I was visiting with a lot of these kids in schools, one of the things they kept saying is, man, that's great, but that could be anywhere in the United States. And so I decided it'd be fun to just honor the location that I'm at, the place that I was born. So in the Shreveport area, Shreveport, Bossier, Louisiana, Bossier City, I decided to create a story based out of my own hometown. the city to which I was born in Shreveport. And so the story is centered, the third book is called The Tale of Four Kings, and it's Barnaby and Drew are inside the city on this scavenger hunt, and they find themselves in the local library, and they meet a new friend who's in some trouble, and they need to help him to solve some things, to figure some stuff out. And in the process, they visit a lot of local areas, but there are 4 tokens in the story that they need to find in order to help them prevent a legendary monster from showing up. And they're kind of racing against the clock to find these 4 tokens. And those same 4 tokens that are in the story, what I did is I created 4 real tokens that are, if you're watching this, they're about this big. And if you're not watching, you're just listening, they are about 9 inches in diameter. And those tokens are hidden within a 50-mile radius of Shreveport, Louisiana. And if you find a token, you'll know how to contact me. And if you find one of the tokens, those tokens are worth between $300 and $500 worth of prizes to whoever finds one of those tokens. And so that's very exciting. Kids love that. They love to be engaged and connected to a local treasure hunt that's real for them. And so when I go into schools here locally in my region, they get fired up about going and finding this local treasure. And so those 4 tokens are hidden out there. And then in book 4, The Sands of Time, because I haven't released it yet, as I'm doing this podcast currently, I can't get into details about this one, but it's a fun family adventure as well that we've already planned out and figured out. And I can't get into details because it gives too much away, and I don't want to give any kind of insight to what's going to be happening for the 4th book. But you'll find out more as that book releases, and you may already be able to find out about what's happening in that book 4 if you are listening after the release date. But I fell in love with sending kids on adventure, not only helping them to connect to the book and read the book, but it made them want to really jump into the story, and they were looking deeper into the story, not just to find the clues, but they also fell in love with the storyline too. And Uncle Buck's Treasure, it's won multiple awards, and it's become by far the most sought after of all the books, probably because of the big treasure that's connected to that one. And then, from there, as I started in that chapter series, and that took multiple years, but simultaneously, I decided to expand into picture books as well. As I was starting into my school visits, one of the things I found out is I had this book written toward older kids, but I didn't have anything for the younger kids. And the treasure hunting and stuff, they get excited about talking about treasure, but it wasn't a book that they were necessarily going to pick up and read. At the time, my niece, she was in preschool heading into elementary school, and she had a lot of struggles with some fears that she had. And so I decided I was going to write a book mainly for her to help her with her fears, and realized this would be a great book for those young kids who were struggling with different fears. And so I wrote a book based off of my wife and I's boxer dog named Max. So I call the book, the series is called Mighty Max. And what I learned in writing picture books was that, I started in chapter books and I had, 10,000 words to say what I wanted to say. And then when I shifted to picture books, now I have 800 to 1,000 words at the most to say what I need to say. So I had to tighten up my writing, make every word count, but also realize that it's not just about the words, but it's also about those illustrations, that the illustrations bring out the emotion and they help tell the story. They help tell what the words aren't saying. So while you have to be really tight with the writing, you can still tell more of the story. And if you're not an illustrator, which I'd encourage most of you to use a professional illustrator, if you're not an illustrator, then you hire a professional and they will help bring your story to life. So, I have a background in some graphic design, and so I did the illustrations myself for my Mighty Max books, and I realized that the illustrations were more important, arguably, than the words themselves. Spent way more time on illustrations than I did on the book itself. And so I have 4 books in that series: Mighty Max Ghost, Mighty Max The Doctor Visit, Mighty Max Storms, and Mighty Max Making Friends. So in each one of those, it tackles different fears that kids have: ghosts under their bed or monsters under their bed, going to the doctor, facing storms. making friends, and really probably some of you adults may want to read along with your kids, because I know adults who have some of those same fears still. And it's just a great book that tells a great story while also helping kids to have some practical steps to overcoming their fears. And then as I continued into my school visits, one of the things I realized in talking with students is there was a lot of the boys were starting to fall off in their passion and desire for reading. And I wanted to change that. And one of the things I learned about boys is they love those books. And not just boys, but one of the things I figured out was these boys loved books that were full of a bunch of fun facts. And so I wanted to provide a book that had a bunch of fun information that they could pass around and talk about. That was about some cool, fun topics. So the first book I did in this series, the series I created was called Big Seven. And the first book for these little curious, fun fact checking boys was called The Seven Summits. And it's about the 7 highest mountains on each one of the continents. So the highest mountain on each continent. And as a mountain climber myself and an adventurer, I love the idea of sharing that information. I love to research it and study. So I already had a good background of information on it, but did a deep dive into the 7 summits and provide that information in a fun, cultural, regional, and information about the mountain itself, all within the book. And so it helps give information about the region, about the people, about the culture in each one of those areas where those 7 summits are located. And it's a fun book that boys love, but really any of those kids who love to read a bunch of facts, they enjoy it. And then the next book that it'll be releasing, so time I'm recording this, it's releasing a month from now. But depending on when you're listening, it's probably already going to be released or soon going to be released. But the book is called The 7 Most Dangerous Animals on the Planet. And I intentionally chose this topic, because I love to have a little bit of controversy, because everybody has a different opinion on the 7 most dangerous animals on the planet. And in this book, I give, in my opinion, the 7 most dangerous animals on the planet. And so it's fun. I love to have these discussions with kids. And I've asked at different school visits, as I've been doing some research, what kids thought. And they had some wild and crazy opinions. And a few of those may just make it into the book as the most dangerous animals on the planet. And I have others in store for that series. We'll probably do 4 to 5 different books in that series, just because they're easy to produce. They take a lot of research, but they're fun to produce, and they can be produced pretty quickly, and kids just eat them up. And as I started, I didn't plan to start, creating this career when I first started. And as I began to grow in my passion for writing and developing these books, I really wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to kind of push beyond what I felt were my limits when it came to writing. And so I started into the journey of creating a middle grade novel. And in fact, right now I'm in the process. I have 2 middle grade novels that are going. And one of them is the manuscript's completely written. It's the first book in a high fantasy series. And I'm also working on a second one it's a semi-fantasy, it's fantasy, but it's more fantasy realism, if you will. And it's a really fun story. It's a standalone book, but I have a fantasy series I'm working on that's high fantasy, and this fantasy standalone book. And I would love to give you some details about these, but I'm actually working to get both of these traditionally published. So I'm in the querying process for these books. So I don't want to release a whole lot of information right now. And hopefully by the time you may even be listening to this, one, if not both of these, will either already be in the process of getting traditionally published, or I would have made the decision to go ahead and self-publish one, if not both of these. But my hope is to get at least one of them traditionally published, and I want to learn that process. And so, when I've become pretty successful in the self-publishing world, and I really love self-publishing. But for middle grade, I felt like I needed to at least explore the traditional route, working with agents and publishers to reach just an even wider audience. I love the little regional platform that I've been blessed with, but I would love to see that audience begin to grow and to spread, and just to get my books everywhere. And I felt like I needed the backing of the traditional publishing machine to help me reach that larger audience, because these books, getting them into the hands of middle grade readers, it's helpful to have their platform. picture books, chapter books, self-publishing and being connected into schools and libraries. It's a little easier in the self-publishing world, but because parents and librarians and teachers are more of your purchasers. But for middle grade books, it's the kids who are driving the purchase of those books. And so to get in front of that audience, it's helpful to have the machine of the traditional publishing world behind you. So I'm exploring that option to see what that looks like, and pretty quickly into this journey of having chapter books, picture books, middle grade novels, I've realized something, that I realized that I wasn't just writing books anymore, but I was building a brand. I was creating a business, and it had to function like a business between school visits and events and marketing budgets and production schedules and writing time and illustrations. There was a lot to it. And so it needed to function like a business. And when I started out, my goal was simply just to write a book. But that quickly shifted into not just wanting to write a book, but I wanted to build a long-term successful career as an author. And now I believe I'm well on my way to reaching that goal, but in particular, reaching my first major milestone, which is I set out for the goal to publish 20 books by the end of 2026. And I'm well on my way to accomplishing that goal. And I share this because I believe that having these clear goals as an author is essential. You may not have the same vision that I have. And if you don't have a vision for where you're going, one, you don't know where you're going to end up. But your vision may look different than mine, and that's okay. You don't have to publish 20 books in that time frame like I'm doing or beyond. You may have a book to just a passion or vision to just do one book, and that's great. Maybe you want to do 3 books. Great. But figure out what are those goals? What's that vision for you? It gives you a target to aim at so that you don't get lost in the process. And at the end of the day, it gives you something to point towards. On those struggling days, you have a purpose that matches the passion you started out with. So if you're just starting out, think about what is success? What does it look like for you? Again, it doesn't have to match mine, but what does it look like for you? Is it publishing one book? Is it building a series? Is it becoming a full-time author? Is it creating a book series that kids love that eventually turns into a TV series that is on one of the streaming platforms, or turns into a blockbuster movie? What is it for you? What does that vision look like? And whatever your goal is, I want this podcast to help you get there. And, as I started getting into publishing, I kept publishing books and learning the industry and developing as an author and getting into schools. And along the way, other authors started to take notice, and I got a lot of questions from other aspiring authors and authors who have had written a book and published it, and they're like, now what? And I get a bunch of questions, and people wanted to ask for help and with formatting and marketing and even the full self-publishing process. And so I started out by trying to help just doing one-on-one work. But I quickly realized that I didn't want to just help people with the labor of publishing a book. I didn't want to just help to format a book or to, help them get their illustrator or to figure out what they need to do with their ISBNs. I wanted to help with those things on a broader and larger scale. I wanted to teach them how to build a brand and a business, to not have to keep coming back to me to figure all these things out, but I wanted to teach them along the way, to show them how they could build a brand and a business themselves, to empower them, to equip them. And that's why I now focus, I'm a little more selective in the author coaching side of helping authors, because I want to help them understand the industry and to develop their brand and, take control of their own publishing journey. But I knew I could do this on a larger scale that would be helpful. And so that's why I created a book. It's as of right now, it's my top selling book that I have. It's called the Children's Author Toolbox. And this is, the reason I wrote it, let me start there. I wrote this because I wanted a resource that was something you could pick up or pull up on your device that would be a go-to guide when you didn't have a coach available. It's helpful to have a coach who can customize a plan for your journey, but I wanted something that could answer some of the simple questions that every author seemed to have. So based on some of those questions I've been getting for years now from both clients and those aspiring authors, I decided to put that all down into a resource, into a book that would be helpful. And I knew I didn't want to just write a book, but I wanted to help these authors have a resource that could turn their book into a brand. That it's not just about creating a book and then producing it, because if that's all you're doing and you get it out there to the world and nobody's purchasing it, and if that's your goal, great. But if you're wanting something bigger than that, I knew I needed to have a resource available for those authors. Because self-publishing, it's more than just hitting publish on Amazon or Ingram Spark or wherever you may be distributing your book. Just hitting publish isn't enough. It's about creating a professional product. It's about building an audience, marketing it like a pro, mastering school visits. School visits are probably one of my passions, one of my favorite things that I do. And I talk about that in the book, but also how to make an impact as an author. And so all those topics are covered and discussed inside the Children's Author Toolbox. And I'll have information for that book that's listed in the show notes so that you don't miss out on that. But that really brings me to why I started the podcast. So I created that book, and it's been a helpful resource. But a lot of times, even that stirs more questions. People like to have a conversation. So that's why I've created the Children's Author Show. I saw a gap in the industry, and I'd go for a long walk or a long run when I was first getting started. And I couldn't find any podcast, or at least not many podcasts, that were specifically designed for children's authors. Now, there are a few out there, and they do a decent job, but I quickly was running out of those. They would have 5 or 6 episodes, and they were 15 minutes long, and I'd go on a run, and I'd be halfway through the podcast. And so I knew I wanted to produce some content that would be valuable and a long form that would be very helpful for children's authors who are out there. And in this industry, children's authors, and specifically self-published children's authors, often get overlooked. And many struggle with turning their passion into a sustainable career. And I talk about it in another video on this podcast about how to build that sustainable career and the income that can be made and those opportunities. So check out that video. But I wanted to be able to help authors turn their passion into that career. And so that's why I created the podcast, to help educate you on the industry, inspire you to keep going, and to equip you with the tools you need for that long-term successful author brand. And I want this to not just be a resource to you, but also want to create a community, a conversation, a place where we can all really grow together. And the best way we can do that is by connecting together. And so I want you to be part of this community, to be part of the conversation, that we can all truly grow together. So the question for you is, will you join us on this incredible adventure? Hey, I want to encourage you that if this sounds like it's for you, if this resonates with you and you say, I'm interested, I'm bought in, I want to be part of what this podcast is going to do, that it is doing, and the value that it's bringing, if that's you, then first of all, I would say that you're already on your way to finding some success within this industry. And if you are on your way to becoming that successful children's author, whether it's your first step or you've been grinding it out for several years, wherever you are in the process, I'd love for you to be part of this community. And here's how you can join the movement that we have. 1, subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or YouTube, whatever the platform is that you're listening to this on. Subscribe so that when new episodes drop, you'll be able to find them. And then also I would encourage you to share this. Share it with fellow writers and other aspiring authors. We need the community. We need each other. And the more of us who are out there and doing this, I promise you, there are plenty of books to be written. And especially in the children's space, we're not going to be tripping over each other. We have a large market in need of high-quality books with high-quality authors, and we want to help you get there. So share this out there with your fellow writers and other aspiring authors. And then finally, I want you to if you're listening, leave a review. That's helpful for us. It helps other authors find it and know that it's a good quality podcast. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then I want to encourage you, leave a comment. Your feedback, it helps us create the best content that we can, but it also gives us an opportunity to engage with you and us to have some conversation among our community in this writing children's book world. But most importantly, I would say we need you to take action. You need to take action. Start working on your book. Make the commitment that you're going to build your brand, that you're going to start developing your career, that you're going to take some steps to be the best children's book author that you can be. And hey, this is just the beginning. And I want to tell you, I can't wait to see where you go and the lives you're going to change and the kids you're going to impact and empower along the way. I can't wait to go on this amazing adventure with you. Thanks for tuning in today to the first ever Children's Author Show. And I will encourage you, keep watching for more tips, more inspiration, more expert advice as we have great conversations with industry experts and really dive into some fascinating topics that will help you improve your brand and grow as an author. We'll see you next time.